Welcome back, everybody, to another edition of Lens Days. This is where we talk about all things lenses. We look at all the lenses, and today we're looking at this, which is the brand new, came out about a week ago. This is the Canon RF mount 50mm f1.8 STM. So it's got a stepping motor. This is very similar to an EF version that they had for DSLRs, which was the EF 50mm f1.8 STM, which was a great lens. Very economical, very cheap, easy on the wallet, but it was a really good lens. And this is kind of the same approach here. Now, do want to note that these are not the same lens design. They have completely different optics, and we'll drill into that in a second. But I do want to look at this lens because for under $200 US, what do you get for this? And it's quite a bit. First thing that's quite notable about this lens is the size. It is extremely small, it's extremely lightweight, and it's very compact. It also features a very close minimum focusing distance of just under a foot, or about a third of a meter. It has 6 elements in 5 groups. It features one aspheric PMO element, which we'll talk about in a second. It features 7 aperture blades, STM focusing or stepping motor. It also features Canon's Super Spectra coating, so you can expect very decent contrast. I love that it's lightweight, and with all of the RF lenses, we have a control ring that goes around the lens. Now, because this is focused by wire, you can set this up one of 2 ways. You can set this up to be your manual focus control, or you can flip it over to some kind of custom function control. So you can do this to maybe do exposure compensation or whatever you want to set that to in the settings. This lens is clearly very affordable. It's also very compact. It also is an RF mount, and when you consider the RF cameras are typically a little bit higher in the megapixel range, I want to talk about resolution on this lens also, because I think that actually is important, because even at an entry-level price, it's still going to show any flaws in terms of sharpness that you are or not getting when you do blow it up to 30 megapixels and up. So if we look at the MTF charts, this is what I would expect to see on a lens at this price point. So we do have really good sharpness in the center, which is this line on the left, and as we go towards the corners, which we move out to the right, you're going to see that resolution does fall off considerably. Now, I want to compare this real quick. You can see this side by side with the former lens for EF mount. This is the EF version of the same lens, and you can see that they're completely different. So this has completely different optics. Things are cleaned up a little bit. We do have some crossing of the lines here, so you can expect probably a little bit of chromatic aberration, but not too much. And of course, all this performance will indeed go up as you stop down. Quick side note, these are Canon MTF charts, and it is worth noting that these are theoretical. In other words, Canon doesn't take readings from lenses. They are theoretical. This is what the lens is designed to do. If you go to lensrentals.com or something like that, somebody who does testing like Roger Sakala, you're going to see that there is things like copy variations, and the MTFs end up looking very different than the theoreticals. It's not a bad thing. I'm just saying that that's what we're looking at here. Now, a second thing I want to look at, which is going to be very telling, and I do this in all of my lens reviews, but let's look at field curvature. So if we take an image of something that has some texture, in this case it is the street, I'm going to run this through the Find Edges filter in Photoshop so we can see exactly and only what is sharp and in focus. You can see that there's a little bit of mustachy curvature here, but it's actually very acceptable. This is straight enough, and considering it's a $200 lens, I think this performs very acceptably. I've tested much more expensive lenses that actually didn't test quite this well, so that's a good thing. You are going to see on the sides, though, that fall off that we saw in the MTF chart. You're going to lose resolution on the side. So most of it's in the middle, and just for a point of reference, Canon's really expensive RF mount 50mm lens, the 50mm f1.2. I have a chart on that too, and that's what you're going to get. So you can see there's an enormous performance difference. It is an f1.2, so that line is going to be thinner because we have a shallower depth of field, but you're seeing what's in focus wide open, and you can see that lens does perform much better towards the corners. However, we're talking about a $2,000 lens to a $200 lens, so there is a big difference. This lens is actually an excellent performer. I've had a lot of fun shooting with it. I think when you look at the technical data, and even with the disclaimer and price, it still performs very well, and what this technical data will tell you is what this lens is really good for. So something architectural where you need a lot of corner-to-corner sharpness, this might not be your best option, but when you're just using it as a carry-around lens, you're shooting people, street photography, that kind of thing, it's going to perform really well. I think the bokeh on this lens is very pleasing. It has just kind of a nice soft look to it. It's not too nervous, not too frantic. Of course, everybody is going to have differing opinions when it comes to bokeh, but I'm pretty satisfied with the way this looks. So what I want to do is I want to dive into some more sample images, and I want to talk about consistency in this lineup and what you can expect to get for your $200. But real quick, I want to give a special shout out to our sponsor this week, who are the awesome folks over at Skillshare.com. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creative and curious people like you. It is a place to explore new skills, skills, you can deepen existing passions, and basically just get lost in creativity. Are you holed up at home? Spontaneous acts of creativity may help break up the routine of a day spent indoors. Explore some workshops and classes to help you get out of that rut. So one class that I've been looking at a lot this week is Street Photography: Unlock the Secrets of Composition, Color, and Confidence. This one is taught by Craig Whitehead, who you guys might actually know. I've featured him on this show a number of times. He goes under the moniker 6 Street Under on various social platforms. This class is excellent, as I would expect no less from Craig. He's a fabulous photographer with a really good understanding of the history of what's come before him, but he adds his own personal spin on the top. He is an excellent photographer. This class is going to teach you things like having confidence, preparing to shoot, being able to pre-visualizing the scene, capturing fleeting moments, playing with abstraction, making selects, editing, and everything. And so I really recommend this. Craig is an awesome guy. You may be able to check out this class absolutely free, and here's how. So the first 1,000 people to use the link below in this video will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium membership. Skillshare is curated specifically for learning. So this means there's no ads and that they're always launching new premium classes so that you can stay focused and follow wherever creativity takes you. So use the link below, check them out, and learn something new today. And I want to give a special shout out and thanks to Skillshare for sponsoring this episode of The Art of Photography. Okay, so enough charts and graphs. Let's look at some images that were made with this lens. I think you're going to be pretty impressed. So in terms of image quality, I'm actually very impressed with this lens. Now, I've only been shooting on it for about a week, but I feel confident in the shots that I've got that I'm really excited about using this for a little more serious work, because I really do think I can get some good images out of it. So one thing you're going to notice, there is a slight vignetting and a little bit of distortion, but I'm going to be honest, I'm not really into doing brick wall shots and a bunch of white walls to test all this, because I don't think it really is going to help. What I want to show you are shots that are more practical in usage. So one thing I've noticed is this lens supports a really nice depth of field transition in the way that it falls off. So like for this image, this is at f5.6. It's not even wide open, and it just looks really beautiful. I love the way it transitions from the focused areas to the out of focus areas. In fact, it's impressive actually to the point where I really want to see what Canon does with an f1.4 in the RF mount system. We don't have one yet, but I think that could be really interesting. The bokeh is beautiful. I don't think it's distracting. I don't think it's super nervous or frantic or anything. It's just very pleasing, and I think all around it's really well done on a lens this small that I suspect probably is using plastic elements, which we'll talk about in a second, but it's actually really nice. Honestly, I thought that fringing and chromatic aberration were going to be a problem on a lens at this price point. They're actually really well controlled. Now you can push it and start to get a little bit to show up, but I think you can do that with just about any lens in a really high contrast situation. It also handles flare really nicely. You do get some flare, and the reason I mention this is there's no dedicated lens hood that comes with this lens, so I was kind of worried that that would be a problem. It handles quite nicely. And also you have 7 aperture blades. You can get sun stars. This one was at f16. Now, another thing I want to mention is this lens does support very close focusing, and this is actually going to give you the illusion that you've got maybe a smaller aperture than f1.8 because you can get so close. It's just going to fall off, and so it's kind of useful. It's not quite a macro lens, but you can focus very close. Micro contrast, I do want to note, is really impressive for a lens also at this price point. Maybe it's not the greatest micro contrast I've seen on any lens, but it retains a lot of detail and highlights. This image in particular was actually overexposed a little bit, and I brought it down almost a full stop, and you can see these lighter parts of the wood in here. It retains detail pretty well. I'm actually very impressed with this lens, and it seems kind of like a no-brainer that you would want to have this in your kit if you're a Canon shooter to be able to use. It's actually very impressive. So as impressive as this lens is for still photography, I want to talk about its use for video, because I just think it's a lot more limited. So if you're doing something like a talking head interview, or you're filming a YouTube video like this, and there's not a lot of focus moving and going on, things like that, it'll probably work just fine. However, I think for a video lens, anytime you need autofocus, the stepping motor in here is audible. It's going to chirp and move around, and you're going to hear it in the microphones. The second thing is, if you move to manual focus, it is focused by wire, and it just doesn't have the same feeling as just going with an old manual focus lens, and I think that's probably a better use for something like that. And then lastly, I think the final problem is that there is an enormous amount of focus breathing with this. It's a great lens, but if you're doing something like a focus pull where you're focusing on something in the foreground or the background, you're going to see the actual field of view change. It just breathes a lot. Having said that, Again, look at the price point, consider what it's for. I just don't think it's the greatest video lens because it's just going to have a very limited use. Another thing I want to mention is this lens is part of this little niche that Canon has carved out in their lens lineup of very affordable entry-level lenses that perform really well. What's interesting is the EF version of this. I remember Lens Rentals had a blog post when they were testing that lens for copy variation, and that was one of the best lenses in terms of consistency they'd ever seen. So in other words, if you have two lenses and a company has some problems with copy variation, it means that one copy might perform better than another. There could be a significant difference in the two. And when they tore down the EF 50mm f1.8, they noticed that there was just an incredible level of consistency across the board. I have the feeling that one of the reasons why is I'm pretty sure Canon are using plastic elements in these lenses. They mentioned that the spherical element in here is an MPO, which I can't find what that stands for anywhere on Canon's website, but I would imagine molded plastic is what we're talking about. Now, the reason people don't like to mention that is when you mention having plastic elements, it sounds like, well, wait a minute, it's super cheap, like water bottle plastic, and it's not. It's optical grade plastic. But it allows you to make a mold, and companies have done this for years, and you get a really high level of consistency. You also get a lens that's very affordable. You also get a lens that's very lightweight, but I think that's kind of one of the secrets in there. I think it's a really smart idea on Canon's part because all of a sudden you have a lens that is very affordable, that is very consistent, and the image quality is pretty good. It's not going to go up against a $5,000 lens, but at the same time, what are the expectations? Canon will sell a ton of these, and I think it's a no-brainer. I highly recommend these. My feeling is that they're better than a lens cap even, so you could just get one to keep on a camera. The image quality is really good, and you could just grab that and go out and shoot and expect great results. So I think Canon have done an A+ job on this. There's two other lenses in this lineup too. One of them is this one, which is the 35mm f1.8 macro lens, and there also is a 85mm f2 STM macro lens also. So I'm going to be talking about these lenses because I'm kind of fascinated with this. You get an enormous amount of bang for your buck, so hats off to Canon for delivering on that. Anyway, that's all for today. I'll see you guys in the next video. Until then, later.